Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com. You know, I get a lot of messages from you folks, either by direct email through Classics Today or through the comments section here on my YouTube channel. And it seems to me that some of the answers might be of general interest. And so with that in mind, I am beginning, as we initiate this third year of my YouTube channel, a whole new series called Ask Dave. I'm Dave. And if you have musical questions that you have asked me, burning musical questions, I may select one and make it the object of a video if I think it has perhaps a more general interest, because some of them are really good questions and interesting questions. And I think a lot of people might be interested in hearing, my answers, maybe not the answers, but my answers, my take on it. And then, of course, that can be the source of a discussion amongst ourselves as well. Because I have to tell you, I wrote something about this already, but I did that little video on 3 horrible concerts I sat through, and I've got so many more to talk about. And, you all chimed in with your horrible concerts. What a great chat that was. Wow, what a fun thread. I hope all of you take the time to read the comments, that come along with the video, because there was some just terrific dirt there that is wonderful to share. And, one of the things I pointed out is that, we have such a tremendous fund of knowledge, all of us, especially because most of my viewers tend to be a little bit, on in years, as am I. We're getting on there, and we have a history. And I think it's a great thing that history doesn't get lost. That doesn't mean we should all just start writing our memoirs, but, we have experiences that are wonderful and that are wonderful to share. So thank you all for participating in that talk too. And I think maybe these will be just as interesting in their individual ways. So let's get right to it, shall we? Let me find the discussion here. Here is the question. And it's a very, very interesting question, I think. I was fascinated by this, actually. Here we go. That's the mail thing. There I am. There's the top of my head. Okay, I can see it. Here we are. It comes from Mr. Heitor Granafe, and he writes as follows. Dear Mr. Hurwitz, I recently watched Classical Nerd's video on Milton Babbitt, and it came to my mind, which would be the criteria to evaluate a performance of serialist music. I believe there is still a traditional expressive intention in Webern and even in Cage's sonatas and interludes for prepared piano, so our traditional criteria of shaping a phrase or a rhythm applies to the performance of this music. The same also applies to hardcore minimalism. Even if admittedly the less interpretation the better in this music, one can feel when rhythm is dragging and so on. But do the same criteria apply when not only pitch, but also note values, etc., are serialized? What about procedural conceptual music of Cage or Cornelius Cardew? Where would you draw the line beyond which traditional parameters of interpretation cease to apply? Varèse, Boulez's sonatas, Le Marteau sans Maître and Pli, selon, Stockhausen's Gruppen or Klavierstücke. Otherwise, I keep learning a lot in your videos. Thank you. Best regards, Heitor Granafe. Well, I think that's a really interesting question. So thank you for asking it, Mr. Granafe, first of all. But let's see if we can come up with an answer or a useful way of thinking about the question. First of all, for those of you who don't know, serial music. What is serial music? Serial music is music which has completely succumbed to the lure of Schoenberg's 12-tone system. And the 12-tone system has a theory in which you have to use, this is not necessarily what always happens, but technically, the idea was you can't use any note in creating the initial material for your work until you've used all the others. You can't reuse one. This guarantees atonality, but you can also apply the same principle, this idea of non-repetition and using all of the various parameters available to you, or however many you select as part of your system. You can apply that to rhythm. You can apply it to octaves, into the actual pitch of the notes that you choose. You could apply it to instrumental color. You can do anything, apply it to anything you want, the same principle. And the more you apply that non-repetitive, use everything before you do anything else principle to the music, the more serial it becomes, and the more it begins to sound like random squeak bloop music. Eek, oop, bloop, ack, wugga, wugga, that's kind of what it sounds like. And so this is a very good question. The fundamental question that Mr. Granafé, I think, asks is, at what point do traditional parameters of performance and our understanding of what music is cease to apply? My answer to that is very simple. As long as human beings play the music, they apply. Because as long as human beings play the music, there is no way that those human beings do not in some way interpret what the composer wrote. I mean, the very act of a composer writing something and asking somebody else to play it presupposes that there is a certain amount of freedom in how it's going to be performed. That's one of the ironies of serial music, isn't it? Because the history of music since World War II, and Leonard Bernstein talked about this too, he felt that there was a crisis of expression in which composers or artists despaired of humanity, of the essentially optimistic and positive outlook that allowed artists to create art that would be played by other people for people, that would be, in the romantic sense, perhaps transformative or transfiguring, or in any case, a positive force. Hindemith believed, for example, that music had a positive moral force, and that moral force resided, at least to an extent, in tonal harmony and the laws of counterpoint as they had evolved over the centuries. But if you want to toss all that out and write music according to your own system, that's perfectly fine too. The question is, what are you trying to express, and how does it get expressed? If it gets expressed through other human beings making music for other human beings, then traditional parameters apply. The problem with having traditional parameters apply in that sense is that much serial music simply reveals itself, I believe, as garbage when that happens. Why? Because people apply those traditional parameters. You can't have it both ways. You really can't. Either what you're doing is absolute, complete, entire, systemic abstraction, mathematical doodling, if you want to call it that, or it isn't. You can't have it both ways. At least I don't believe you can have it both ways. A lot of serial music is kind of like string theory. The mathematics behind it may be very, very beautiful, but it may represent absolutely nothing other than a self-consistent mathematical formula. And there is music that can absolutely do that, because music fundamentally is mathematical anyway. So yeah, there are composers like Milton Babbitt, who was the author of that famous essay, Who Cares If You Listen? He was a provocateur, and also quite a good teacher. I mean, he was the teacher of Stephen Sondheim, for example, and a very funny guy, actually. But the fact of the matter is that if that is going to be your attitude, then you're really better off not composing for human beings at all. Your music should simply exist as a complete abstract theoretical construct, and there's no reason to perform it. But if you're going to perform it, then you'd better suck it up and deal with all of the traditional judgments and imperfections and feelings that, musical performance necessarily entails. I mean, it really is. It's a very, very interesting aesthetic question. As I was saying, Leonard Bernstein, gave a talk about how he was doing stuff like by Xenakis and Boulez and people, about how in the wake of World War II, composers despaired of humanity, and as a result, they tried to withdraw as much as possible the the possibility of human intervention in their music. They tried to fix every parameter as much as they possibly could. And of course, the logical extension of that process is electronic music, computer music, Yanis Xenakis and stochastic music generated by machine is far removed from human intervention as it's possible to be. Now, you don't have to like it. There may be no reason for anyone to listen to it. It may express nothing other than itself. It could simply be a completely abstract musical construction that follows a particular pattern or certain rules that were predetermined beforehand. Or not. It could be random noise. That was John Cage's theory. All of those things are possibilities. But when people make music, that's my answer, then traditional rules of interpretation and judgment apply. And you could even argue that pushing the button and having your computer spit it out is also people making music. You could go there. It's nothing, no reason you can't. So that's my answer to the question. I believe that as long as music is performed, it's a performance, and the parameters of performance are the same as long as people are doing it. And so we have a right, by the way, to judge it, to like it, to dislike it, to curse at it, to make fun of it, to do anything we want to do. We don't have to take it seriously. We don't have to care what the composer wanted to do. We don't have to admire or respect the performers for wasting their time on such dreck. We can be resentful at having been lured or suckered into it, or we can think the whole thing is a completely mesmerizing and transformative aesthetic experience. Ultimately, it depends on the composer. And my sense is that composers who are men of genius manage to justify whatever it is that they're doing for us. Because why are they writing it in the first place? They obviously have a need to express something. And they obviously want others to understand what that is that they're trying to express. So however difficult or tangled or knotty the theoretical system that underpins what they're doing, there ought to be some avenue of access. Now, it's up to us to determine whether we want to hear it or not. We don't have to work hard to do it. My view is simply, if it doesn't strike you, reasonably quickly, or at least give some sense of the composer inviting us into their world, why waste your time? Go listen to something you like. So there you go. I hope this gives you something to think about and answers your question. And thank you for asking it, Mr. Granife. I thought it was really, really interesting. And I hope to get some other questions from some of you, which I can in turn use for occasional talks in Ask Dave, the classical music answer guy. It's like Bill Nye, the science guy. I'm willing to do that if you guys think it's worthwhile. It's okay. It really is. And I look forward to it because you're a wonderful, wonderful bunch with very, very interesting things to say. And I'm learning as much as you are. Believe me, I really am. So keep on listening, my friends. Thank you so much for joining me. Take care.